All right. Hi, everyone. If you're joining in here live today or watching the recording, thank you for tuning in. All right. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off here from my side of things. Again, whether you're joining in here live today or watching the recording, I appreciate you tuning in to our presentation today. Gonna go ahead and kick things off from my side of things. So first off, to introduce myself, hi everybody. My name is Logan McHugh. I'm a channel partner manager here at Flowgear. Very much appreciate you taking the time out of your day live today, or whether it be in the future to watch the recording of this meeting. Before we kind of kick things off, I'd also like to introduce Matt Baldner here. He is one of our integration engineers, and as we get into the live demonstration of what we're going to be putting on for you all today, he will be the one performing that. As far as kind of a quick agenda of what we plan to cover through today's call, first and foremost, kind of just give that overall general market fit of why Flowgear is being brought up to you all. Then dive directly into what is Flowgear, who we are, how do we compete. Dive into some of the connectors that Flowgear has to offer, a very high level kind of comparative analysis of where Flowgear fits versus other tools in the Microsoft ecosystem. Only want to kind of quickly touch on our pricing, giving it's a very unique concept of what we have to offer. From there, we have a very unique pre-sales tool and a proof of concept that I'll quickly touch on. And then most importantly, end with a live demonstration today where we will be showcasing Dynamics 365 connecting to Sage Intacct. So kind of kicking things off here at a high level, as I'm sure most have kind of seen through the advent of cloud, AI, and e-commerce supply chains, companies have really become very heavily dependent on an increasing number of apps, systems, services to really operate efficiently and grow their businesses. But also at that time, sharing data has become a big pain point and ultimately what allows these businesses to run most optimally, but it's become a big challenge for them. At the same time, there has been a large shift in many companies' attitude towards the use of systems and technologies. This has moved away from that normal proprietary hand-coded type solution to the best of breed SaaS type technologies out there that exist. Historically, if a company wanted to bring technology into their business, they would commission a software developed to really build out that bespoke or proprietary type solution for them, as everybody believed their business was kind of completely unique to the next. Today, companies would rather license out, again, these kind of best of breed applications out there that exist. If you need an ERP system, you would contact Dynamics 365, a nonprofit system, Blackbaud, a CRM system, a Salesforce, an e-commerce system, a Shopify, so on and so on. As this has really evolved over time, the only missing piece of the puzzle is how do we get these systems to talk to each other in real time, and that's where integration comes into this piece of the puzzle. Kind of at a high level, what is Flowgear? With whom do we compete? And how do we differentiate ourselves in the market? So Flowgear, we are a middleware platform that enables businesses of all sizes to shed the workload and complexity of app-to-app integration, not only quickly, but affordably as well. The platform allows companies without writing any code or low code, if that's your preference, to integrate with any application, service, API, database, you name it. What that comes with is whether you're trying to integrate your internal systems or you're upstream to your suppliers or downstream to your customers, you can accomplish all of this through this one platform. At the same time, Flowgear is a Microsoft-backed solution as we are fully hosted through Azure. You can even purchase our services through the marketplace directly. How everything that has been mentioned is achieved through our large ecosystem of what we call pre-built application connectors or our technology connectors that really do provide this instant integration to hundreds of SaaS or on-prem applications, as well as this idea of reusable workflows and APIs, which I'll quickly touch on. At the moment, Flowgear, we have over 300 pre-built what we call application connectors covering all your mainstream CRM, ERP, e-commerce, nonprofit, financial, you name it types of technologies. So of course, Microsoft Dynamics 365 is one of those core connectors, as well as all tools that exist in the Microsoft space. Really, what these connectors are designed to do is abstract away that complexity of connecting to and working with third-party applications or APIs. And then once you connect in, you visually surface only the relevant functionality, objects, and fields that are available within the application's API itself. I also do want to quickly note, while we have 350 plus application connectors, this is also an ecosystem that's growing on a daily basis. To make ourselves extremely versatile, when an application connector is not available, we are not limited to just those. We have what we call generic technology connectors that are really used to connect any system out there that has an API that's accessible. Any type of SDK we can call into. It does not have to be a cloud-based software. It can be an on-prem software. It can be some type of database desktop application. As long as there's a means and a way to push and pull data, Flowgear has the ability through those generic technology connectors, making ourselves extremely versatile in the systems that we can integrate. um, Once you've kind of, let's call it, established these connections into these different types of technologies or systems out there, the idea is, again, once you've integrated these multiple systems together, which it can include both those cloud-based and on-prem technologies, is to then visually build out workflows to pass data between these systems, to automate a process or fulfill a transaction across internal customer or supplier systems. This is truly where the true value of Flowgear is derived. The platform gives your clients a blank canvas to build a powerful rules engine to determine how, when, and in what context that data should be used to, again, automate processes or solve real-world business objectives that will increase revenue, reduce costs, create a significant competitive advantage in their industry, you name it. Kind of one thing I want to make obvious here is in the world of integration and process automation, tooling traditionally has been split into what we like to kind of coin as three different categories. Really, at that entry level, you have a lot of product-based or citizen-type integration tools out there that exist. These products are designed to really achieve a very specific function with little flexibility, and you very quickly realize that there's quite a few limitations that come with these tools as far as the customization aspect. They also require you to ultimately tailor your business around those products given those limited capabilities. And kind of that middle layer is where you have those hand-coded or custom integrations. This is where that scenario arises of hiring a developer that's commissioned to build these integrations between certain endpoints. Hand coding in itself is quite brittle as it integrates these different endpoints at any point in time. Endpoints update, things happen with technology, as we're all very familiar here. And ultimately, these integrations are very prone to breaking, having downtime, things along those lines, which ultimately put companies at risk. So while those solutions can be quite customizable, they come with a tremendous amount of maintenance and upkeep that ultimately can cause downtime, having their limitations as far as the solution goes. And they're really at the top end of integration solutions, which is where you have this idea of a platform solution, which really allows you to build these tailored integrations and automation solutions around your specific business requirements. At the top end of these platforms is where you have a specific category known as iPaaS, that integration platform as a service, and that is directly where Flowgear falls into. This is a technology that mostly enterprise companies to date have really used to integrate their systems, and there's a specific reason around that, and that's kind of really tailored to cost here, which I'm going to touch on here in a moment. To date, iPaaS really has exclusively only been available to your very large US enterprise companies, really around this function of price. A lot of these competitors out there that exist, the Celigos, Boomies, MuleSoft, Jitterbit, SnapLogic, you name it, tend to kind of veer towards a very large initial price point on a monthly subscription basis, where Flowgear, one, has kind of tailored ourselves to be completely different here. And how we've managed to differentiate ourselves in this market is by focusing on that massively underserved US mid-market where companies don't want to use those tools or a hand coding or a product type tool, but haven't been able to afford iPaaS either. What Flowgear has done is we've managed to do this because we're the only iPaaS company that has taken this enterprise technology and made it again available to that mid-market at a price point that is not only scalable but affordable as well. So to kind of bring some to color to what I'm getting at here is if you look at Flowgear's pricing, we have four fixed price plans that you're seeing here on the screen. Also, if you were to go to flowgear.net, you would see this is transparently listed on our website for a very obvious reason here I'll make clear in a moment. Our entry level plan is our base plan at 1,499 per month, scaling to our enterprise plan, which is 7,999 per month. This is a fixed price per month on a 12-month contract, and each one of these plans, you'll get to use all of Flowgear's connectors, whether they be those application connectors or generic technology connectors, and there is no variable cost associated with Flowgear. So there's no consumption cost per connector or per task. There's no transactional volumes or limits that come with these, as your company's maybe, hitting these APIs X amount in the off season, but 10 times in the, peak season, and you ultimately are billed more through some of our competitors. There is no variable cost when it comes to how Flowgear works, making us extremely unique and scalable in this space. One thing I did want to touch on, given there's interest around what Flowgear has offered through the presentation so far, something to make ourselves, again, extremely unique in this space is this idea of a complementary proof of concept. We are very aware that we're really one of the only companies out there that offers a very tailored proof of concept in this space. These POCs are definitely, kept at a high level and generally serve the purpose of demonstrating how seamlessly and quickly Flowgear can integrate into clients' third-party systems, ultimately kind of confirming the functionality of what we're saying we can do. So generally, kind of at a high level, we like to identify one or two integration automation use cases. We kind of generally ID a problem or a typical requirement or pain point. We put together a high-level spec, and then from there is where we actually kind of build out a portion of this integration. What we like to do in these proof of concepts is actually get access to a test scenario or a sandbox environment with some sample data. Again, making this proof of concept as relatable as possible when it comes to showcasing our capabilities. We generally like to say our turnaround on this is 10 days at maximum once we kind of get the access that we're needed. Generally, that's a lot quicker, but we just kind of put that cap on there. And then really when it comes to the deliverable, it kind of gives a very high level design of what an effective integration solution is going to look like with various different workflows that are built out. When it comes to the benefits of this integration, while of course it's going to showcase and kind of, let's call it, create that confidence in that Flowgear is capable of what we're saying we can do. On top of that, it also gives Flowgear a very solid idea of what our customers are looking to accomplish and maybe open the door to more possibilities that the end user didn't even know was possible when we first started engaging each other. So these complementary proof of concepts really have a win not only for the end user, but for us as well to kind of hopefully get the best out of these solutions for our customers. When it comes to these proof of concepts, one thing I do want to make clear is that we frequently get asked who was responsible for building these. So we do have a POC division internally where we can build it for you and kind of run this whole process. At the same time, Flowgear does have plenty of partners in the Microsoft ecosystem who you may or may not already be working with, who can also orchestrate or facilitate these integrations. Uh, Kind of the high level run through there of who Flowgear is, what we do, as well as a few very important aspects. The next component of what we want to do here today is actually show a live demonstration of everything I've generally spoken through today. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to show a live demonstration of pushing data from Dynamics 365 into Sage Intacct. And with that being said, I'm going to kick it over to Matt here, who will share his screen and run through this for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Logan. Nice to see you all today. So like Logan mentioned, what we'll do as far as demos goes is passing orders between Dynamics 365 sales into Sage Intacct. Before we get to the demo, I do want to provide a high-level overview of the platform itself, as well as the tooling that goes into these integrations, so that when we get to the demo, the whole thing makes a little bit more sense. So what you're looking at here is kind of the screen you'll be greeted with when you log into the Flowgear platform. We obviously offer role-based access to give different users in the tenant different permissions within the platform itself. These tenants are also spun up against their own individual VMs on the backside. So you'll get your own dedicated backend infrastructure for each one of our clients. You're not going to be sharing backend resources with other clients of ours, mainly to the effect of security, as well as eliminating things like noisy neighbor effect, some other issues you might see in some multi-tenant environments. So to kind of start here, I'll work down the left-hand side. The first section we'll focus on is workflows. This is obviously where we will be developing our integrations. So we'll be extracting data from a source, manipulating that data in some form or fashion so that our target system can ingest that data. Down here, we have workflow logs. You can think of workflow logs as an audit measure for your tenant. You can look at what your tenant's doing in terms of specific workflows, nodes or triggers, which we'll get into here in a moment, as well as a date range. It is important to note that you are able to redact certain information from these logs, as you can see on the screen here, or you can choose to not log any information at all, depending on your security preferences. Working down the left-hand side here, we have connections. Connections are where you will enter in your credentials to authenticate with a particular system or application within your tenant. And we'll kind of dive into the connection details here in a moment. And lastly, on this side, we have drop points. So a drop point is a lightweight service that you install on-prem, which is going to open up a persistent outbound connection to the primary Flowgear environment, which then is going to facilitate the flow of data between the drop point and your tenant. So basically it means you can get data from on-prem systems without exposing it to the wider internet. So whether if you have a on-prem application, database, FTP server, what have you, the drop point is going to be what we use to facilitate the flow of data between that on-prem system and maybe your best-of-breed SaaS application that you have. When that data is in transit between the drop point and your tenant, that data is obviously going to be encrypted and compressed. Lastly, we have the settings pane. This is where you can do things like manage site users, check the health of the platform, things like that. And we'll kind of dive into the tooling that goes into these particular integrations now. So again, the use case we'll be focusing on today is between Dynamics 365 Sales and Sage Intacct. We'll just query sales orders out of Dynamics, as well as customer data, check if a customer exists in our ERP, and then create a sales order on the Sage Intacct side. Before we get there, I do want to run through the tooling. So whenever you open up a workflow, you'll be greeted with the Flowgear design canvas. Purpose of the canvas is to facilitate a low to no code drag and drop design process. How we emphasize that dragging and dropping is you can see these plus icons on the back of the screen here. So if we open up one of these icons here, this is going to bring up a selection of nodes. And a node is a design element that's dropped on the canvas that's going to facilitate a particular integration process. So a node is going to do something for us in an integration. Depending on what that node does, we've separated them out into 4 distinct categories. The first one is going to be connectors. Essentially, connectors are going to expose 100% of the vendor's API functionality through something we call samples. And samples just allow you to pick the particular action you'd like to perform against that system or application. Next, we have triggers. Triggers are going to dictate how a workflow is invoked or how that threaded data is going to be passed from the source to the target. A ton of different flexibility with our triggers. We have things like timers if you need something to run on a minute basis, 10-minute basis, day schedulers, week schedulers. We can watch for a file to be landed on an FTP server. We also facilitate webhook or action-based triggers as well through our enterprise API functionality. Next, we have processors. Processors are going to act on data in memory with the intent to transform that data and prep it for the next stage of the workflow. So obviously, when we're extracting data out of a source system, that data needs to be manipulated or transformed in some form or fashion so that our target system can ingest that data. That's where processors are going to come into play. And then lastly, we have flow controls. And flow controls are going to allow you to write expressions on the canvas, and those expressions will enable conditional branching on the workflow. And that conditional branching can facilitate things like supporting logic, business logic, error handling, for processing 100 transactions from our source to our target. One of those transactions happens to fail. How do we want to handle that failure? We can build retry mechanisms, build reports on the fly that will actually render a CSV or Excel sheet and have those emailed out to the appropriate audience, whether that's a distribution group or individual members of an organization. So before we get in there, I just want to show you how we set up our connections on our side. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring up our Dynamics 365 sales node. You can see here we have a connection bar. If you're creating a connection for the first time, you'd hit this plus button here. I obviously have a pre-configured connection for the purposes of this demo, so we'll drill into those and see what that looks like. For our branded connectors, these credentials will be specific to that system or application. So for Dynamics 365, we'll see things like URL, client ID, client secret, as well as username and password. It is important to note that these credentials are separated by environment. So you can see here we have our test credentials entered in here, If we move over to production, you can see those are empty. So you're actually able to enter in different credentials per environment that you're working on for the integration. These environments are also customizable. So in-house, if a client has a dev, test, UAT production environments, you're able to add or subtract environments to match what you might be doing in-house. So once we're happy with our credentials here, we can come up to the top here and select test. And this will confirm that our credentials are valid and we have connected to our particular instance of Dynamics 365. I talked about it a little bit before, but with these connectors, we have what we call samples. So this is going to generate the particular action we want to take against that system or application. So we hit this drop down here, select choose sample. And Dynamics, this is actually going to bring up over 5,000 different samples or actions we can take against that system or application. So once you actually select a sample, we'll just query accounts. You'll see that our action is changed to query on our account object, and then we'll actually get a sample payload of some conditions and page numbers that we can pull from there. To keep this basic, I'll just go ahead and pull 5 records. And then we can actually run this node in isolation versus building out the entire integration, realizing you failed on step 1. So once you run this is going to bring up the activity log down here on the bottom. If we move over here, we'll see our Dynamics 365 sales. And then in this response, we'll see the data that we've actually pulled from Dynamics 365 in this scenario. On the target side, we'll obviously bring up our Sage Intact node. And same thing on this side. We obviously have a pre-configured connection for the demo, so we can drill into those connection details as well and see we have our credentials specific to Sage Intact in this case. And we can also go ahead and test. So on the target side, once again, we'll do the same thing, hit the drop down, choose sample. And on this side, we're going to want to create a customer. Now, when I select the create sample on the Sage Intact side, you can see our action has changed to create on the customer object. And then in our request, this is actually going to give us a real-time example of what Sage Intact is going to expect when we pass a customer record or whichever sample you choose as far as API calls go to the destination. Now, obviously, we need to map this data. So we'll go ahead and bring up our quick map node in the middle. This is our flagship transformation tool. And we'll hook up the response from Dynamics 365 sales to the source of the quick map, and then the result to the request of Sage Intact. And when you hit change view, this is going to bring up a source data tree on our left-hand side of the data we pulled out of Dynamics, and then a target data tree on our right-hand side of what Sage Intact is going to expect when we pass a customer record to it. As far as mapping goes, we'll look at some in-depth examples, but it's simply dragging and dropping from left to right here. And then we also have what we call map expressions. These map expressions are based on Excel functions, so a low barrier to entry. As far as logic goes, anything you can do in Excel, you can do within these map expressions, such as count, sum, lookup, if statements, text manipulation, date manipulation, and we'll look at some examples of that. I'll quickly get rid of these nodes here. And then we will just get right into the demo here. I'm going to kind of run through each node, what it's doing, why it's here, and then we can obviously run it and look at the results over in Sage Intact. So the first thing we're going to do, again, we're passing sales orders from Dynamics to Sage Intact. So the first thing we'll do is obviously query the sales order object within Dynamics. We'll then run this through a for each. This for each node is going to iterate over each one of those records we pull. Obviously, in a production scenario, we're going to be pulling multiple records at one time. We want to capture these at a transaction level in this case. And one reason we want to do that is we want to pass this through what we call key values. Key values you can kind of think of as persistent storage within your tenant. So I'm going to hop to the back end of this workflow. As we pull a sales order from Dynamics and create a sales order within Sage Intacct, we'll actually tag these transactions on the back end of the workflow through set key values. These key values will be the key, the sales order ID or key from Dynamics bumped up against our Sage Intacct sales order ID as well. Two things this is going to do. One, it's going to prevent duplicates from going into your target system. As we pull a sales order, we will run it through this get key values. If we have reference of that key we've already processed, we won't actually reprocess that transaction. You can see here, based on the execution flows of found and missing. If it's missing, aka we haven't processed that transaction over to our target system, we'll continue on with it. If we have, in this case, an insert only scenario, we will just ignore that particular record. What this is also going to do is allow us to be able to reference different transactions in different systems. So oftentimes we have customers who have a need of a bi-directional flow. So we'll extract data from a source, create that transaction in the target. There's certain updates that happen in the target that then need to flow back to the source for that particular record. When we set these key values on the back, we can also do a get key values call and always have reference of what transaction equals what and where to update those particular transactions based on updates that might have happened in either system. So after key values, we're going to go ahead and get the order lines associated with that first sales order. What you see down here is what we call custom properties on these connectors. So based on our initial API call and then run through the for each, we're actually going to dynamically pass that particular sales order ID. And then within this simple condition, we can see that we're going to have a filter where the sales order ID is equal to the order ID we pulled from the first step. We're then going to do the same thing on the customer here. We're just mapping a filter, but we'll also look up the customer and contact records through the same mechanism. We'll basically extract the account associated to that order that we pulled in the initial step, and then do lookups to pull the customer and contact information from Dynamics 365. The next step here is to then do a lookup in Sage Intacct to determine if we do or do not have an existing customer for that sales order in Sage Intacct based on the account data from Dynamics. So in our Sage Intacct node here, you can see we're just doing a simple filter to say we're going to, again, dynamically pass that customer ID. This could be email, whatever kind of constitutes a unique customer record in your target. We can obviously facilitate that through this query. Here, we're assuming the customer IDs are the same, and then we'll return a record number and a customer ID. You can think of this as an if statement. So basically, if we return a record number from this query, we'll go ahead and map that sales order to that existing customer. If we do not have an existing customer, aka we did not return a record number from our previous lookup, this is where this workflow is actually going to branch off into two different directions. So if we don't have an existing customer, we'll actually come down and map that customer on the fly through this false flow here. And once again, this is kind of like the example we looked at. Our source is going to be that account data and some contact related data from Dynamics. And then our target here, or our result, is going to come from that create customer sample we looked at the beginning. So if we hit change view, once again, this is going to show us our source data tree on the left of our Dynamics data, target data tree on the right. Again, you can see here we've mapped several fields over to create that customer. And you can see some basic Excel functions here for text manipulation, date manipulation. One thing I didn't touch on is as you build this mapping, it'll actually provide a real-time preview of that mapping over here on the right-hand side. So super useful for when you're mapping, 20, 30, 40 fields between business objects. You can obviously map the data, apply your map expressions, and alter them on the fly rather than running the entire integration. And then once it's in the destination, you realize you need to make some adjustments. So based on that, we'll feed that mapped payload to Sage Intacct to create that customer. And then we'll check if that was successful based on an if equal node. If it's true, we'll go ahead and loop back through to create the sales order against that newly created customer. So again, two ways to map a sales order. We either have an existing customer that we're going to map the sales order directly to, or we have a newly created customer from this bottom portion of the workflow where we'll create the sales order against that customer. So this is us actually mapping the sales order itself. So you can see here, again, our source data tree on the left is going to be our opportunity or our sales order and the line items associated with that sales order. Our target is going to be the sample we chose to create a transaction on the Sage Intacct side. So once again, here we see some hard coding, which is also possible through these map expressions. Something's always going to remain constant. We have some date manipulation here for our date created. This is also a get value, so it's essentially a lookup. And what we'll do here with this customer ID, again, if we're pulling multiple records in a production scenario, some customers might exist, some might not. So this customer ID that we did the lookup on to tie the sales order to it will actually come from two different places, potentially. First is going to be the existing customer out of the response on our customer lookup. Second is going to be that newly created customer that we created down here on the bottom portion. Additionally, we're also going to do a lookup based on our products. So a lot of the times, products aren't going to have the same ID. Products or items are not going to have the same ID in your source and your target systems. So what we're doing here is actually a lookup where we will pass the product number from Dynamics. We will then reference the product lookup property that we have on the bottom of this quick map. We'll pass the Dynamics product ID and then translate that to the associated item ID within Dynamics. Just to show you what that lookup looks like, you'll see this product lookup here. Basic example, but this is essentially where you would create a lookup table to pass your specific Dynamics product IDs and translate those to the appropriate item IDs on the Sage Intacct side. So from there, we'll pass that SO transaction create to Sage Intacct. We'll check if that was successful based on the 200 response, essentially. And then this is where we'll actually tag those transactions on the back end, whether it's a success or an error. So from there, we can go ahead and run this and look at the results. On the bottom here, it's going to go ahead and run the activity log, which is going to describe in detail of everything I just ran through here. So I'll be brief. But you can see here, we're first off going to query the Dynamics 365 sales. We'll iterate over each one of those, check if we've processed that particular sales order based on the ID here. You can see here it's missing. We'll then make a subsequent API calls to grab the order lines, the customer, and the contact associated with that particular sales order. We'll then do a customer lookup in Sage Intacct to determine if we have an existing customer based on the criteria from the source system. You can see here this is set to false. We'll then map that customer, create the customer, check if that was successful. It was. We'll then map the sales order, create the sales order, and check if it was successful. It was. This is where we'll have our two keys bumped up against each other, our dynamic sales order ID bumped up against our Sage Intacct sales order ID. So what we can do now, come over to our Sage Intacct sales order module. We can refresh this. And we'll see here we have a newly created sales order on this top line for our newly created customer, ABC Technologies. We can drill into there and see the multiple line items associated with this sales order. Other than that, that is it for the demo portion. A couple other things I just want to touch on quickly. First being our in-house release management system. You can see here, if you hit this Manage Releases button, you can see here we have a revision commit of 17 in our test environment and none in production. You can move this up to production after a code review or what have you by simply hitting Promote and Confirm. This is obviously set by role-based access, so only administrators would have access to promote this. We also integrate with GitHub today if that's your preferred method. So it's not set up in this demo site, but under this 17, you would see a GitHub commit hash, where then that would link you directly to your GitHub repository where you could do pull requests or those types of things there. The last thing I want to touch on as well is revision management here. You can see here we have 17 different commits. You can look at these commits in detail, obviously with a message if wanted to. You could also roll back using revision commits as well. If you have a working copy in production, you change some things in a lower environment, promote that up to production, it's not working as expected. You could also roll back within the system as well. And then the last thing I want to touch on is obviously our enterprise API functionality. So this would be a good tool for webhooks when those are necessary, or action-based triggers. So you can see here, over here on the right-hand side, are enabled start modes. We have run on demand, always on, which is going to be something that you would include if you had a scheduled workflow. And then HTTP binding here, which would facilitate that webhook functionality. So you can see here we have our binding method, HTTP binding path, and then over here on the left-hand side, you're actually able to create API keys to facilitate those particular webhook functionality. And then last one's obviously going to be our MCP tool. So what you're actually able to do is build workflows and interact with those workflows through a ChatGPT, a Claude, etc. Where you could have workflows on the back end that then connect into ChatGPT or Claude, and you could retrieve information, those types of things from our MCP tool. So that is it from my side. Thank you all very much, and Logan, back to you.
Perfect. Just going to end things off here, sharing my screen here just to showcase just some contact info for anybody that wanted to reach out from our side of things. Again, everybody that joined in live today, as well as tuning into the recording here, thank you very much for your time. You'll see the contact info there. Feel free to reach out at any time with any questions, concerns. You would like a free proof of concept, you name it, we're happy to help and do so. But other than that, very much appreciate everyone's time. And yep, thank you.